We've got the power panel standing by to break down everything that happened today. But first, I want to bring you the latest on the report that took over the campaign trail. This was the Globe and Mail headline this morning, that CSIS alleges India organized support for Poilievre's 2022 Conservative leadership bid. The Globe cited an unnamed source with top secret clearance saying CSIS learned that Indian agents were involved in raising money and organizing within the South Asian community, and that CSIS did not share this information with Mr. Poilievre because he does not have the necessary security clearance. Now, sources have confirmed to Radio-Canada that CSIS is making this allegation. Joining me now is one of the authors of that Globe and Mail report. Robert Fife is the Globe and Mail's Ottawa bureau chief. Bob, good to see you. Thanks for being here, man.
Anytime.
Okay, you write that according to your source, CSIS didn't say the efforts by India was sweeping or highly organized. So how and how much does CSIS think India interfered here?
Well, according to our sources, that CSIS had information that Indian agents and their proxies had tried to raise money and support for Mr. Poilievre in the 2022 leadership convention, which, by the way, he handily won. Nobody is suggesting that this had a major impact or it had the outcome, affected the outcome of the election. But the fact of the matter is, it is foreign interference. A foreign power was trying to have an impact on the election campaign, as they do with other parties, to try to cozy up and have some political influence.
Well, what do they think the goal was there in terms of getting Pierre Poilievre elected? Because what did they think the influence goal of India was in this particular case?
Well, as we've learned from the public inquiry into foreign interference and numerous CSIS reports, that foreign powers such as China and India and Pakistan and Iran try to ingratiate themselves and use diplomats and their proxies in the immigrant communities to gain influence over politicians, that they will either be less critical of the country or that they might even be able to speak up in favor of them. Nobody is suggesting, again, that Mr. Poilievre was doing that. In fact, our source said that CSIS had, there was no evidence that Mr. Poilievre or his inner circle even knew about this. But here's the problem we have here, Dave, is that we've known since last June, when the National Security and Intelligence Committee of Parliamentarians said that there were instances where a foreign power, in particular India, had interfered in the leadership convention. We never knew whether it was with Patrick Brown or Pierre Poilievre or anybody else. But Mr. Poilievre could have found out. All he had to do was to get a national security clearance so that he could ask CSIS to brief him on who was involved in this, and as leader of the party to make sure those individuals had nothing to do with the Conservative Party ever again.
Right, but this is, I guess, the challenge here. Like, would he have been... I guess it's hard to know, Bob, but like we don't know exactly how effective the influence was. Though his victory, Pierre Poilievre's victory, was so massive, it likely had no effect in the outcome, something Patrick Brown has conceded to. We don't know if he was aware of it. There's certainly no evidence of it, certainly no evidence that people around him were aware of it. If he had gotten the briefing, what's your understanding of what he would have been able to do there? Would he have known who the specific agents of India were who were trying to interfere in the campaign? Would it be that level of granularity that he would have been able to take action on? Because that's what I'm curious about here.
Yeah, I believe that would be the case. Let's go back to the case of Han Dong in 2019, the Liberal running in Don Valley North. CSIS came to the Liberal Party, very concerns about Chinese students and others who were in the consulate helping out to get him elected. Mr. Dong said he didn't know anything about this, but they informed the Prime Minister of it, and the Prime Minister allowed that nomination to go ahead. We subsequently learned from the public inquiry how extensive that help from China was, and as you now know, Mr. Han Dong is not going to obviously be allowed to run for the Liberals in this election campaign. So it's a similar thing. CSIS comes to you with information. You can choose to ignore it if you want to, but if you're a serious leader, surely you want to know who's responsible for this, and you want to tell people in the party, I don't want anything to do with these people.
Right, but here we are. He was asked again today, and the Liberals are attacking Mr. Poilievre on this, that to this point he has still not gotten his security clearance. He says he doesn't want to do this because it's a trap, that the Liberals are trying to silence him on criticizing their handling of this particular issue, though I don't know what role the Liberals will play in a Conservative leadership race. I mean, how much of a challenge do you think this could be for Mr. Poilievre in this campaign? Because he's coming into this, it's kind of about Canada standing up to the rest of the world, and this headline and the security clearance issue lands on him today.
Well, two things. First of all, we learned on yesterday when senior security people held a news conference to say that we are really taking the issue of foreign interference seriously in this election campaign, particularly from China and India. Now, Mr. Poilievre says he doesn't want to have a security clearance because somehow he believes the Liberals are going to use that information to either discredit him or to try to deny him from getting limited information so that he can then criticize the government. That is not the way that operates. When you get a security clearance, it is done by CSIS and nonpartisan civil servants. They do not share that information with the Prime Minister, political staff, or cabinet ministers. So it is a pretty clean process. All the other opposition leaders, including Mr. Carney, have got their security clearance, and they're saying that Mr. Poilievre should as well. In fact, Justice Marie-Josée Hogue of the Public Inquiry said all the federal leaders need to get a national security clearance so they can be properly briefed on foreign interference in this country. We now know it is a serious issue. So why Mr. Poilievre does not want to take this seriously and by somehow questioning that the government is going to use it against them is kind of baffling.
Bob Fife, the Globe and Mail's Ottawa Bureau Chief. Thanks for your time today, sir.
You're welcome.
Well, the main party leaders naturally reacted to that Globe and Mail story on the campaign trail today. And while the Conservative leader defended his decision not to get a security clearance, the other party leaders called it irresponsible.
What I will not do is commit to the oath of secrecy that the Liberals want to impose on me. They don't want me to be able to speak about these matters. So they'll bring me into a dark room and they'll say, we're going to give you a little bit of breadcrumbs of intel, and then we'll tell you can't talk about any of this stuff anymore.
I find it beyond baffling. I find it downright irresponsible that the leader of the opposition, day after day, month after month, year after year, refuses to obtain his security clearance.
Mr. Poilievre is irresponsible, not having been briefed and not having taken the necessary steps in order to be briefed. Like I said a bit sooner.
If you care about the country, if you care about democracy, you would get a security clearance and find out as much as possible to protect our country. But he chose not to. And the only reason he chose not to is because he wanted to put his party and his partisan interests ahead of the country.
Okay, that's where we're going to begin with the Power Panel today. Emily Nicola is a columnist for Le Devoir. Michel Cadario is a former Liberal National Campaign Director. Françoise Boivin is a former NDP MP. And here with me in the studio is Kate Harrison, who is a Conservative political analyst. It's good to see you all. Kate, let's start with you here. I mean, how big of a problem is this for the Conservatives in this day of the campaign? Is it a problem because we've known India meddled in that leadership race? Now the dots are connected to Mr. Poilievre directly.
Yeah, I think election interference is a problem. It's a problem that I think spans party affiliation. I don't know that we've necessarily learned more today than what was previously known in a general sense. And I don't think, David, it does change the rationale from Poilievre to not receive that briefing. I go back to what exists within the CSIS Act to provide a briefing to political leaders under threat reduction measures. That remains an option for CSIS to use today to brief Pierre Poilievre on potential interference.
He wouldn't accept it, though, when it was offered last fall, right? Because he said it would have limited his ability to speak,
My
right?
understanding is that it's an open offer to have a briefing under the threat reduction measure context. Rather than it create intrigue in the Globe and Mail headlines, I'm struggling a little bit with how this is both so secret and secure information and intelligence that it can't be provided to the leader of the opposition under the threat reduction measure, but it absolutely can be shared with the Globe and Mail and with readers of the paper. So this is either a serious enough measure that it requires that briefing to occur under the TRM. The Prime Minister can also provide that briefing to the leader, should he so choose. Neither of those things have happened, but it somehow is appearing on the front page of the Globe.
Well, look, we've had a lot of things appearing on the front page of the Globe and Mail from national security files over the last few years. I don't think any of them have been legal, probably including this. But here we are. I mean, Michelle, what's your thoughts on this? I mean, the suspicion was India interfered in the leadership to help Mr. Poilievre, though, to be very fair, without his knowledge, without any proof that he knew about it or anyone on his team knew about it. But, you know, the argument he makes is, I'm not getting the briefing because I don't want to be gagged. What are your thoughts there?
Well, you know, I think that in this context where we're in the middle of an election campaign and there's really two people who are going to be Prime Minister, one of two people who are going to be Prime Minister after this really kind of speaks to character and judgment. I don't know that Canadians will understand why on earth he wouldn't have gotten his security clearance when it was offered, when every other party leader did. It doesn't really actually follow any kind of chain of logic why you wouldn't want to know if there were issues within your party. And whatever he was trying to suggest about it would muzzle him in some way, I don't know how you would be muzzled by the truth. And so I think that's a worry. It got him off of his campaign message. And I'm not sure that, you know, when he couldn't stand up to Danielle Smith yesterday, and then today he couldn't actually, you know, figure out why he didn't get a security clearance. I don't know that it's the best start for the election campaign. And I don't know that that kind of a character issue is what he wants to kind of drag through. It was a completely different political climate when he made that decision that was highly partisan, highly political, in a highly charged environment. But the world has flipped on its ear, and Canadians are expecting something different, and this election is about something different. And so I think that he's going to really rue that the fact that he didn't get that clearance when it was offered to him.
Francoise, how do you see this one? Does this change anything today? What's your sense?
Well, it does change something today in a sense that it totally derailed pretty much everybody's campaign who were out to speak about different things and mostly ended up answering questions about interference. So that being said, for me, my first incline this morning when I saw the news is like, isn't that old news? I mean, was already aware the attacks from the other parties against Poilievre right now are exactly the same things they've said before, that it lacks a bit of seriousness. A bit like Michelle was saying, is that for the voters this time, it's different than what it was last autumn and when the commission was in full force, because people were still in the mentality of let's get rid of Justin Trudeau and the Liberal government. Now they're facing Donald Trump. They want to see who's going to be the best prime minister, and that might be just the point where it might tip the balance. I know in Quebec it might not be that big a deal. Right now they're talking more about a French debate that is not going to happen. But that being said, it just adds to the image that voters are starting to make of the different candidates. And it might be a dangerous game. Sometimes in life, it's better to say, you know what? I still don't believe that it would have changed anything. I still personally don't understand that if there's something serious happening, why are the information organization not giving the information without giving something that is super confidential? I mean, that for me doesn't compute. But that being said, Pierre Poilievre has to learn to say sometimes, you know what? I was wrong. I will go get it if it satisfies everybody. And now I will come back to you, public, to tell you if I learn anything different than what I already know.
So, Emily, I don't know if he'll say he was wrong because I don't think he believes he was wrong, right? He has taken this position, he believes in it, and he's sticking with it. But now it's a day that wasn't clean on the campaign trail, and it's opened up an avenue for him to be attacked. I mean, what's your sense of how this is affecting things?
Well, the question is, why is it opening an avenue for him to be attacked? When it comes to the Liberals, the Conservatives do have the habit, and it works, to attack the Liberals on, all of their connected friends in high places and the connections that happen there. So that's a story that tends to stick to the Liberals. I don't know that Pierre Poilievre realizes that this story sticks to him because of the 2 decades he spent in politics. He's made a reputation for how hyper-partisan he is. And we're now at a moment where people are looking to who's a leader, who's going to be able to put country before party. And that story sticks to him because of that context of hyper-partisan behavior in general. And so him being yet again not following essentially the group and saying, no, this is impacting my own party, but I will not get security clearance, is something, it's a narrative that sticks because of all the other things we already know about Pierre Poilievre as a person, given his character and the 2 decades he spent already in politics. And so to me, it is the Conservatives' Achilles heels, the way that trying to paint the Liberals as Laurentian elites is always going to be the Liberal Achilles heel. But Pierre Poilievre's hyper-partisanness is why this story is so sticks. If it was something out of character, we would not be speaking about this story the same way, because there's already been inquiries and what others have alluded to before.
Right. So, Kate, on this, Pierre Poilievre has had security clearance in the past as a cabinet minister. Right. That you get your Privy Council status for life, you don't get your security clearance for life. It needs to be renewed. That's just the normal. Justin Trudeau won't have it in a couple of years, right? The security clearance doesn't gag you. It's a specific information you can't talk about. So the allegation is that he can't get his clearance, won't get his clearance. I'm not saying it's right. I'm not saying it's right. So why not just get it and not necessarily take the briefing just to put all that to rest? Because this is the insinuation from the critics, right?
The issue at hand, I think, is what you can do with the information that you learn after you receive this briefing. There's the security clearance question. Again, to your point, he was a minister of the Crown. He would have had to have top secret security clearance when he served in that capacity. And so it's what you can do with this information. When Elizabeth May and Jagmeet Singh were read into the information that was provided, Jagmeet Singh actually said very clearly that he was restricted in what he would be able to share based on the information that he learned. So for Poilievre, the problem is twofold. One, if there are issues of interference within the party, it's not immediately clear what direct action could be taken by a party leader after learning that information to control matters within their own party. And number two, being able to hold the government to account on this information based on what you've learned becomes more challenging because you cannot share and divulge the information that's included in that briefing. So again, I come back to there must, and I agree with Françoise, there must be some degree of information that could be provided to Pierre Poilievre through the threat reduction measure to get at this issue and to have a better understanding of what impact the interference, should it have happened, may have had. Right now, we just have, headlines driven in the Globe and Mail that suggest this is very serious, but not so serious that we haven't made use of that measure within the CSIS Act. Right. So just a question on this, and we'll move on a bit. But you don't need to get briefed on everything. He could get briefed just on the interference in the Conservative leadership, right? Something that directly affects his party. It's not about holding, because the government has no role in the CPC leadership that he won. So why not just get the clearance to get briefed on that particular thing to see if there are rules and regulations and things that you can copper fasten as the party leader to make sure future leadership processes are above board? Yeah, I'm not trying to answer your question with another question, but why could that information not be provided through the threat reduction measure? Well, I don't know, because look, the threat reduction measure, if you are seen to have benefited from the foreign interference, maybe you give a threat reduction measure to someone who is under threat or can be reasonably expected to take steps to reduce the threat. Right. If you're benefiting from it, maybe they don't think. I don't know. CSIS is too opaque on this stuff. The CSIS and the Hogue report made clear that the outcome of this was not. Oh no! I'm not saying that. It's just this is, he could have put this away as an election issue by getting it done. But he didn't, and here we are. Maybe it amounts to nothing. Like a lot of the allegations of the foreign interference stories, some of them have been sensational, but
but not meaningful, right? Why not just make sure you can look after the things in your own party as opposed to say worried about the government?
I think this comes down to what he could reasonably do based on what he learns through this report. We had other opposition leaders receive the report, say that they would be very limited in what they could do. Pierre Poilievre would see as no different to another opposition leader having received that report in terms of their inability to act. And Elizabeth May and Jagmeet Singh said as much.
Okay, Michelle, quick last word on this topic.
He didn't ask to be briefed in any kind of way under any kind of auspices.
His chief of staff
and to suggest that ignorance is better because I want to be partisan, I just don't think that flies.
No.
And again, it goes back to character and what Canadians are judging them on. And I suspect that if we were in this environment back then, he would have made a very different decision.
Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre spent a second straight day stumping for votes in the Greater Toronto area. He started in Vaughan with an announcement on housing before heading to Hamilton for a rally tonight.
It's almost surreal, isn't it? 10 years ago, $1 million would have got you a castle on a mountain overlooking a valley of gold. A new Conservative government will put Canada first by taking GST, the federal sales tax, off of all homes under $1.3 million.
But Poilievre was later forced to answer questions about foreign interference in his own bid for Conservative leadership 3 years ago. The CBC's Kate McKenna can explain. Kate.
David, Pierre Poilievre is in Hamilton and set to hold a rally tonight as he looks to win more seats in this city. But today he's facing questions about his past and about his steadfast refusal to get top secret security clearance. As was first reported in the Globe and Mail, there are new allegations that Indian agents and their proxies sought to meddle in the 2022 Conservative leadership race in the favor of Pierre Poilievre. He won the race handily, but the Globe went on to report that CSIS has never been able to brief him on this foreign interference because he won't get his top secret clearance. Once again today, Poilievre defended that decision, saying that would muzzle him. However, we know that other political leaders, including other opposition leaders, have received their top secret clearance, and they say that it doesn't muzzle them. They called Poilievre irresponsible today for not getting it, but he hit back, saying journalists should be asking about Mark Carney's trip to China while he was the chair of Brookfield Asset Management and the loan that the company got soon after. But the Liberals say Poilievre is just trying to deflect and take the spotlight away from his own refusal to get top secret security clearance. David?
That's the CBC's Kate McKenna in Hamilton, Ontario. Well, as Kate mentioned, reporters did ask Pierre Poilievre about his lack of security clearance today, and he stood by his refusal to get it.
I've already had a security clearance. What I will not do is because I was a cabinet minister, so I've already been cleared. What I will not do is commit to the oath of secrecy that the Liberals want to impose on me. They don't want me to be able to speak about these matters. So they bring me into a dark room and they'll say, we're going to give you a little bit of breadcrumbs of intel, and then we'll tell you you can't talk about any of this stuff anymore.
Well, joining me now to talk about this stuff is Dan Stanton. He's a former executive manager at CSIS and the director of the National Security Program at the University of Ottawa's Professional Development Institute. Dan Stanton, good to see you. Thanks for being here.
Oh, it's great to be here, David.
Let's start with what Pierre Poilievre said there. He said, I've already been cleared, because he was a cabinet minister. That's true 10 years ago, but does that still apply today?
No, it doesn't. I mean, he still needs to have that specific clearance for a briefing. Your chief of staff doesn't quite cut it because they can't really work with that information. They can't vet or look at perhaps members that might be problematic. It's the leader of the party that has to have the clearance. Okay,
he says this is a trap from the Liberals because they want him gagged and unable to talk about what it is he would get briefed on. How severe would the gag be if he does get this briefing?
I don't really see it as a gag. Other than the fact that if you are briefed, if you do have a clearance, there is a confidentiality expectation. If CSIS is going to brief a politician, let's say, who has the clearance, it's understood that they're not going to use that or exploit that for political advantage or hopefully leak it. So it just comes with the territory. If you're going to be privy to that information, you have to respect it.
Okay, so he couldn't come out of the briefing and say, you wouldn't believe what CSIS just told me, obviously, because that's the confidentiality expectation. But let's use this specific example here on whatever happened in the Conservative leadership race, based on the reporting today, this was mentioned in the OG report that India tried to play a role in this. Does the confidentiality expectation prevent him from taking action either against individuals or against problems in their leadership processes that were identified in this briefing?
I would say it does not. You still don't have to disclose the salient points of the briefing. You just know, for example, there may be an MP who should not perhaps have a cabinet position if you end up forming a government, who may in fact be under influence, witting or influenced by a foreign state, and as the leader you need to know that. That's probably the rationale the other leaders of the parties used in getting cleared and in, for example, being briefed on the Nisikob findings, was to be able to have some sort of safety check on their party.
So what is the risk for him as a party leader in not getting the clearance and not getting the briefing with a finding that India tried to meddle in the leadership? Is there anything he's running the risk of in terms of being the leader of the Conservative Party of Canada?
Well, I think for one thing, you're out of the loop. The other thing is we know that the threat landscape has changed with the U.S. tariffs, which is an impact on our sovereignty and our national security in a way. So there could conceivably be briefings down in the future of party leaders or MPs with respect to this tariff war we're having. It's not just on India, not just on foreign interference. There are other things that leaders are going to have this. We have a new disclosure regime that came with Bill C-70 where CSIS can disclose to politicians to mitigate the threat. And so there could be an awful lot more coming down the pike than simply the foreign interference piece.
Well, why is the threat reduction measure not good enough here? I mean, not to get too technical on that, but this is the avenue the Conservatives point to. They say CSIS or the Prime Minister could do a lower level of briefing if there's truly a risk. Why isn't that appropriate in a situation like this?
The threat reduction measures were given to the service as a sub-mandate, a secondary mandate to mitigate the threat. They weren't given to the service to brief people who don't want a clearance to be briefed. So it's really not what it was designed for. It's a very strong power that CSIS has, and it's to be used selectively in trying to mitigate a threat, not to brief people who don't want to get a clearance.
Okay, so this latest reporting today from Robert Fife and Stephen Chase of the Globe and Mail is about interference at a certain level in the Conservative leadership race. Now, Poilievre won that in a landslide. There's no suggestion that India tipped it in his favor. There's no suggestion he was aware or anyone around him was aware. And we're not even sure of the threshold that this interference was able to reach. So why is this a cause for concern in your view? Or is it a cause for concern in your view?
Well, I mean, I'm kind of curious about the timing, why this is coming out 2 days after the election is launched. And if you look at the China leaking, principal leakers, there was a partisan element to that. We know the one that was described as the backbone source had put in a testimonial that they were motivated by the SNC-Lavalin affair.
Right.
That's partisan. I suspect in this case, there's somebody that's not going to be voting Conservative that's leaked this. So that's the problem with this type of reporting in political foreign interference, is that information can be exploited, not just through leakers, it can even be with people that are in the loop that can use it for political advantage. It's got that potential all the time.
No, certainly the timing is an issue in this. But just set that aside for 1 second. I am in no way minimizing that point. What is alleged to have happened here? If it didn't affect the outcome and there was no complicit, behavior from the winning party, why is this a big deal, I guess, from CSIS
think
perspective?
It's just basically resurrecting the issue as well as the clearance, going back to what the Hogue inquiry found, that China and India did considerable influence in our electoral processes. And like in the China case, it didn't impact the outcome of the election. And in this particular case, India's interference didn't impact who became leader of the party. But it seems to be a reiteration of the fact that these states are doing this type of interference, whether the person is winning or not, in our electoral processes.
So the push, we've gone through what Mr. Poilievre says in terms of defense of his decision process here to not take the briefing. The pushback from the other side of this, because as you pointed out, this is happening in an election, but it continues what we heard before. It's irresponsible if you want to lead the country and lead a party and be the Prime Minister to not get this briefing. What's your view on that as someone who's worked in this world about You made the point, the threat reduction measure is not meant for someone who won't get the clearance. What's your view on this? Because I know Justice Oak said leaders should get the clearance.
It's a new way of doing business. I've had the experience years ago of having to brief a politician, and there were no disclosure mechanisms. You had to walk on eggshells. You didn't know how it was going to go. You didn't know if they were going to pick up a phone. But what we now have is the disclosure framework where politicians, universities, law enforcement can be briefed. And that enhances CSIS's ability to do an effective investigation. At the same time, it minimizes the threat. So it's sort of a matter of basically getting with the program that the government is coming forward where intelligence can be briefed selectively to mitigate the threat. And so in this particular case, party leaders are aware of what's going on, of a foreign state potentially influencing in their party. So to stand outside that regime, in my opinion, is pointless.
And do you think that's what Mr. Poilievre is doing by not getting the security clearance? He's standing outside that regime and feeding into the criticism of his office?
I mean, what motivates us to do that, I don't know, and I'm not a political analyst, but this is actually the way the government sensibly has being able to get intelligence, useful intelligence, to mitigate threats. So if he's not going to be part of that, that's unfortunate, particularly if he ends up prime minister.
Yeah, I guess things change. When you become prime minister, you don't need a security clearance, as I understand it, because of the nature of the job you hold. You can then get access to the information. But just as a final point, his chief of staff, Ian Todd, Mr. Poilievre's chief of staff, has gotten a clearance and has been briefed on some things. And of course, as part of the SITE task force oversight, the group of civil servants that monitors the election, there will be 2 security cleared members of the Conservative Party who can get these briefings. Is that enough of a safeguard here if the leader doesn't have the clearance?
Well, I don't know. I don't think it is. If the leader is the one that can have certain say, let's say, for example, who's going to be in the party or who's going to be in caucus or things like that, they're going to have the information. I don't know if the chief of staff or the other 2 people have that leverage within the party. So it's really the messaging. Is the party leader of other parties have got their clearance and got their briefings. The Nisikob report findings is a good example. Why would one political party not avail themselves of that information?
Dan Stanton, former executive manager at CSIS. We appreciate your time, sir. Thanks for coming in.
My pleasure.